I want you to imagine something with me for a second. Picture yourself sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown high-rise, heart hammering so hard you can feel it in your throat, a manila folder on the table in front of you, and the most powerful woman in the building sitting directly across from you. Not speaking, not moving, just reading. Just turning pages. And with every page she turns, you watch something shift behind her eyes. That is exactly where I was 14 months ago. And by the time she set that folder down and looked up at me, I knew, without a single word being spoken, that everything was about to change. My name is Ashley Carter, and this is the story of how I documented my way out of a nightmare and into the truth. I had been working at Meridian Consulting Group for 3 years when a woman named Diane Holloway became my direct manager. Meridian was a mid-sized firm that handled operational strategy for healthcare companies, and up until Diane's arrival, I had genuinely loved my job. I was a senior analyst, I was good at what I did, and my previous manager, a quiet and fair man named Tom, had always told me my work spoke for itself. Tom retired in the spring, and Diane came in from a competitor firm in late April with a reputation for results and a management style that nobody quite warned us about until it was too late. She was polished. That was the first thing everyone noticed. Diane Holloway walked into a room the way some people walk onto a stage, deliberate, aware of the effect she was having, calibrated down to the heel of her shoe. She was in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed, and she smiled in a way that made you feel chosen when it was directed at you. For the first 2 weeks, it was directed at me quite a lot. She said she had reviewed my file, that she was impressed, that she had big plans for the team, and she needed someone like me at the center of it. I remember going home that first Friday and telling my roommate, my best friend since college, a woman named Jenna, that I thought I had gotten lucky. That Diane seemed like exactly the kind of manager I had been hoping for. Jenna, who has always been more perceptive than me about people, said, "Just watch." I laughed and told her she was being cynical. I wish I had listened. The shift was gradual, the way these things always are. It started with small things that were easy to explain away. A project I had been leading for 6 weeks was quietly reassigned to a colleague named Brandon the week before the client presentation. Diane told me it was a bandwidth issue, that she needed me focused on a different deliverable, that Brandon would handle the client-facing piece, and I could circle back once things settled down. I was disappointed, but I accepted it. A few weeks later, a strategy memo I had drafted, a detailed, 30-page operational analysis I had spent 2 weekends building from scratch, was presented to the executive team by Diane without my name anywhere on the document. When I asked her about it afterward, she smiled at me with that even, measuring smile and said she had attributed the research to the team collectively, that individual attribution at the executive level wasn't standard practice. I nodded. I went back to my desk. I did not say another word about it. That was my first mistake. Not confronting it. I have had a lot of time since then to think about why I stayed quiet, and the honest answer is that I did not trust my own perception yet. I kept wondering if I was being oversensitive, if I was reading into things, if Diane had a reason I simply wasn't seeing. That kind of self-doubt is exactly what someone like Diane counts on. It buys her time. By month 3, the pattern was too consistent to explain away. Every significant piece of work I produced, the client intake frameworks, the restructuring models, the efficiency audit I had essentially built alone over 6 straight 12-hour days, was making its way into Diane's presentations and her conversations with the executive team with her name on it and mine nowhere. She had also started doing something subtler, and I would come to understand, more dangerous. She had begun managing my reputation. In team meetings, she would reference my work in ways that subtly undermined it. Ashley had an interesting first draft of this, but we evolved it significantly when the evolution she was describing was formatting changes I had made myself. She would express gentle, public concern about my focus. "I've been checking in with Ashley on bandwidth. We want to make sure she's not stretched too thin." I was not stretched too thin. I was being systematically sidelined, and the framing was being laid in advance to explain it, if anyone noticed. I went home one Tuesday night in early August and sat across from Jenna at our kitchen table and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Jenna, who is generally one of the most opinionated people I have ever met. When I finished, She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Ashley, start writing everything down. Today. Don't wait." I asked her what she meant. She said, dates, times, what was said, who was in the room, what the document was called, what Diane presented, and what you submitted. Every single thing. Keep it somewhere she can't access. And don't tell anyone at work that you're doing it. I started that night. I opened a private document on my personal laptop and I wrote out every incident I could remember going back to April with as much specificity as I could reconstruct from memory. Dates, email chains I had saved to my personal account before they could be archived or deleted, draft documents with metadata that showed my name and the creation timestamps, meeting notes I had quietly kept in a notebook I carried everywhere. Over the following weeks, the documentation became a discipline. Every time something happened, I wrote it down within 24 hours. I did not editorialize. I did not write about how it made me feel. I wrote only what had occurred, what the evidence showed, and where the evidence could be located. Jenna, who works in employment law, reviewed my approach and told me I was doing it right. She also told me that if the day came when I needed to use what I was building, I should go straight to the top and not stop anywhere in the middle. Don't go to HR first, she said. HR protects the company. Go to someone whose interests are not served by this continuing. That someone I decided was the CEO. Her name was Catherine Marsh, was not someone I had ever spoken to directly. She was in her late 50s, a founder-level executive who had built Meridian from a 12-person boutique into a company of nearly 400 employees over 2 decades. She had a reputation for being rigorous, private, and deeply protective of Meridian's culture and intellectual integrity. That last word, integrity, appeared in her public-facing statements and internal communications so frequently that it had become something of an internal shorthand among staff. The kind of behavior Diane was engaged in, claiming others' intellectual work, managing their reputations to cover it, was precisely the kind of thing Catherine had written about explicitly in a company-wide memo the previous year. That memo had been largely treated as ceremonial language. I had saved a copy of it. I requested a meeting with Catherine's office through the formal scheduling system on a Thursday morning in late September, citing a confidential personnel matter. I did not name Diane. I did not describe the nature of the concern. I simply said it was time-sensitive and that I was requesting the meeting in my capacity as a senior analyst with documentation to share. Her assistant, a efficient and unreadable woman named Paula, came back to me within 2 hours with a slot the following Tuesday afternoon. 30 minutes. I said that would be enough. The weekend before the meeting, I did not sleep well. I reorganized the folder 4 times. Jenna sat with me on Sunday evening and made me walk through what I was going to say from the beginning, stopping me when I got emotional or when I started to over-explain. You are not asking her to believe you, Jenna said. You are asking her to read the documents. Let the documents do the talking. Your job is just to be calm. I practiced being calm. It did not come naturally. Tuesday arrived cold and overcast, which felt appropriate. I wore the gray blazer I saved for important things, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and sat in the waiting area outside Catherine Marsh's office for 11 minutes before Paula showed me in. The office was smaller than I expected, with a long window that looked out over the city and a circular table near the window where Catherine was already seated, reading something on a tablet. She set the tablet down when I entered, stood briefly to shake my hand, and gestured to the seat across from her. She had the composed, unhurried manner of someone who had conducted thousands of serious conversations and had stopped being rattled by them long ago. She asked if I wanted water. I said no. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me and said, simply, "Tell me what you need me to understand." I had rehearsed an opening. It dissolved the moment she said that, and instead I told her the truth plainly, that I had been experiencing a pattern of intellectual theft and reputation management by my direct supervisor since April, that I had documented it with specificity over the past 7 weeks, and that I was bringing it to her because I believed it was the kind of conduct that contradicted the standards she had described in her March integrity memo, which I had also included in the folder. Then I slid the manila folder across the table to her. She looked at it for a moment before she opened it. Then she opened it. What happened over the next 19 minutes is something I have replayed in my mind more times than I can count. Catherine Marsh read in the way that serious people read, not skimming, not glancing, but actually reading, line by line, pausing to review the email chains and the document metadata, and the side-by-side comparisons Jenna had helped me format the night before, where my original submissions were placed next to the versions Diane had presented, with the timestamps and version histories intact. She did not speak. She did not look up for the first several minutes, and I sat in the chair across from her and kept my hands in my lap and tried to breathe evenly the way Jenna had told me to. But I watched her face. I couldn't help it. There was a moment, it came about 7 or 8 minutes in, when she reached the section documenting the March deliverable, the 30-page operational analysis, where something changed in her expression. It was not dramatic. It was not the kind of thing that would have registered on camera or been visible across a room. It was a very small tightening around her eyes, a stillness that was different from the composed stillness she had worn when she sat down. She turned the page. She went back. She read something again. Then she moved forward, and the stillness stayed, and I watched her work through every page to the end. When she closed the folder, she did not put it down immediately. She held it for a moment, both hands flat on the cover, looking at it rather than at me. Then she set it to the side and she looked up and I saw it, not anger exactly, but something close to it, something controlled and precise and final. The kind of look that belongs to someone who has just understood something they did not want to understand but will not pretend they haven't. She said, "How long have you been building this?" I said, 7 weeks of active documentation. But the incidents go back to April. She nodded once, slowly. Then she said, "I want you to know that I have read every page of this, and I take it seriously. I'm going to need a few days to review this further with appropriate discretion. I will be in contact by end of week."
She paused.
"Thank you for coming to me directly. And thank you for the quality of this documentation. It made this conversation possible." I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back and said, "I just want to keep doing my job. That's all I've ever wanted." She looked at me with the same expression she had worn when she closed the folder and said, "I understand that. I hear you." I rode the elevator back down to the 7th floor and went to the bathroom and stood over the sink with the water running for about 3 minutes before I felt steady enough to go back to my desk. End of week came. Paula emailed me Thursday evening to schedule a follow-up meeting with Catherine for the following Monday. The subject line was simply, "Follow-up, confidential." I did not sleep much that weekend either, but for different reasons this time. Not dread. Something more complicated. The sense of a thing having been set in motion that could not be stopped, and not knowing yet whether that was a relief or a terror. Monday morning, I walked back up to the 14th floor. This time, there was a woman I did not recognize already seated at the circular table when I was shown in, introduced to me as Miranda, from Meridian's external legal counsel. Catherine was at the table as well. She did not lead with pleasantries. She said that she and Miranda had spent the week conducting a preliminary internal review, that they had examined the document records I had provided and cross-referenced them with the company's own filing systems, and that what they found had been, in her words, materially consistent with the account you presented. She said that the situation would be handled through the company's formal conduct process, that she was not at liberty to share details of personnel actions with me, but that she wanted to tell me directly that the matter was being taken seriously at the highest level. Miranda handed me a 1-page letter on company letterhead outlining the formal complaint procedure and confirming that my report had been received and was under review. She explained the protections that applied to me as a reporting party and asked me if I had an attorney I had been consulting. I told her my roommate was an employment attorney who had advised me informally. Miranda said that was very wise. Then Catherine said something I did not expect. She said, "I also want to address something directly. You mentioned the March analysis in your documentation. Based on what we've reviewed, it's clear that work originated with you. I'd like to make that right. We'll be discussing the appropriate path for that with the client team, but I want you to know I'm aware of it, and it won't be ignored." She held my eyes when she said it. I had to look at the table for a moment. Diane Holloway was placed on administrative leave 9 days later. I learned this not from an official announcement but from the particular quality of the silence that fell over our floor that morning. The way people moved differently, spoke in lower voices, kept glancing toward Diane's office, which was dark. By noon, The whisper network had filled in the broad strokes. By end of day, our team received a brief email from the head of HR stating that interim management arrangements were being put in place and that team members were encouraged to direct any questions to HR or their skip level. My skip level, as it happened, was now Catherine Marsh herself, pending a restructuring of the team. The weeks that followed were strange in ways I had not anticipated. There was relief, yes, a physical relief, like something that had been pressing against my sternum for months had simply lifted. But there was also an exhaustion I had not allowed myself to feel while I was in survival mode, a bone-deep tiredness that arrived all at once now that the pressure was off. Jenna made dinner the Friday after Diane went on leave, and we sat at the kitchen table where all of this had started, and she opened a bottle of wine and raised her glass to me and said, "You did that." And I started crying, which I had not done once during the entire 7 months. Not once. The formal investigation took 6 weeks. I was interviewed twice by Miranda's firm, once by an internal HR lead I had not previously met. I answered every question directly and referenced the documentation for anything I couldn't speak to from memory. At no point did I characterize Diane in terms beyond what the evidence showed. I did not call her names. I did not speculate about her motives. I simply described what had happened and showed where the record confirmed it. Every time I felt the pull towards something more personal, more emotional, I heard Jenna's voice in my head. Let the documents do the talking. Diane did not return from administrative leave. I was told nothing more official than that, but the outcome was not difficult to infer from the paperwork I eventually received acknowledging the closure of the formal complaint process and affirming that corrective action had been taken consistent with company policy. In January, for months after I had sat down across from Catherine Marsh with a manila folder and a pounding heart, I was promoted to lead analyst and given permanent management of the project portfolio I had been building since my first year at Meridian. The March analysis was reattributed in the company's client records. Catherine sent me a handwritten note, actual handwriting on actual notepaper, which no one does anymore, that said simply, "Your work has always spoken for itself." Now the record reflects it. I kept that note. It is in a frame on my desk, next to a small photo of Jenna and me from the weekend before that first meeting with Catherine, when we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by printed documents and empty coffee cups, and Jenna told me to breathe and go and calm and let the truth carry the weight. The truth, it turned out, was very well documented. People ask me sometimes what the moment was, the moment I knew it had worked, that it was real, that I had actually done it. And I always tell them the same thing. It wasn't when Diane went on leave. It wasn't when I got the promotion letter. It was those 19 minutes at a circular table on the 14th floor, watching Catherine Marsh turn pages. It was the moment she went back and reread a passage, and her expression shifted, and she held the folder in both hands when she finished. It was her face. Everything I needed to know was already there before a single word was spoken. And I had put it there, not with anger, not with desperation, but with 7 weeks of dates and timestamps and quietly saved email chains. With patience, with evidence, with the kind of work that, when the right person finally reads it, does not need you to say anything at all.